Josh, with severe weather, and good morning, everyone. We've got ourselves a potentially historic outbreak of tornadoes in the forecast starting tomorrow. I'm going to share my screen with you, and really no way to sugarcoat this. It's a very dangerous weather setup tomorrow, especially in the afternoon and continuing through tomorrow night. And likely more severe weather next week. Details on that obviously aren't so firm, so we'll get to that later. But we now have a moderate risk of severe weather. I think there's a chance we'll see a high risk in the area here, spanning from eastern Arkansas into southeastern Missouri, far southern Illinois, western Kentucky, western Tennessee, and into the Delta region of Mississippi. Farther north than where we saw the destruction last week, but not by a lot. Those areas still could be under the gun as we get later into tomorrow night. We've got a lot of dynamics with our next storm system. We've got a lot of ingredients in place, but there is not an extreme amount of uncertainty yet as to who's going to get this. So just I caution you, if you're anywhere in these orange zones, just to start preparing now for the worst and pray for the best. I mean, that's really all you can do at this point. Mother Nature's going to do what Mother Nature's going to do, and all we can really do is yield to it and just be prepared, whether that be going over a tornado plan with your family, having places to go in case you are under a tornado warning, having helmets in place, having a storm shelter. If you're in a mobile home, obviously finding a shelter where you can go ahead of time and not waiting and hoping that the storm misses you, because as you're going to see in a few minutes here, there are a lot of places that will not get missed from severe weather. Saturday, the good news, if there is some, is that I think the major outbreak is going to be winding down. There'll still be locally severe wind and maybe a few tornadoes possible in this region here in the eastern Great Lakes into the northeast, and possibly a few afternoon storms we have to keep an eye on in Georgia and South Carolina. But a lot of wind as well with the storm system. So we've got ourselves a pretty significant outbreak. Right now, the Storm Prediction Center has done pretty much exactly what I expected it to do, and that's issued a moderate risk of severe storms. This storm track is very similar to the one back in the second weekend of December of 2021, where a moderate risk was there. Although we did see tornado tracks over 200 miles that caused all kinds of damage from Arkansas to Kentucky and Illinois. Later on this evening and overnight tonight, we do have a marginal risk for severe weather. I'm not super sold on the threat for severe weather, but I think we'll probably have some warnings in the early morning hours tomorrow over northern Nebraska and moving up into southwestern Minnesota, as well as late tonight, early tomorrow over parts of Oklahoma. Probably not going to be widespread tornadoes, but there could be a couple in here later on tonight. And I'll show you that. The threat for hail is 5% in these areas here. The threat for a tornado is mainly confined to the Red River area into Oklahoma. And that's going to be probably after about 3 in the morning local time. And there'll be a threat for some damaging wind as well. Now, tomorrow is our day of moderate risk. And you can see the areas the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted. I've pretty much been talking about these spots the last couple of days. We're all looking at the same models. We're all looking at the same modes here. So definitely going to be multiple tornadoes in here, probably more than 50 tornadoes, maybe even more than 100 before all is said and done in that 24-hour period from 7 a.m. Central tomorrow to 7 a.m. Central on Saturday. Looking at the probability of tornadoes, it is large. It is over 15% and significant severe weather expected in both of these areas. Kind of two modes that we're watching. Do not rule it out in St. Louis, Springfield, Joplin, areas in here, Champaign, even Southwest Indiana. Do not rule out tornadoes. Just because you're not in the hatched area, it doesn't mean you can't get them. But these are the areas that are going to be favored for the stronger tornadoes, and especially this region here in western Tennessee, southern Missouri, western Kentucky, eastern Arkansas, northwest Mississippi. That's the area likely to see the more intense, longer track tornadoes. There'll also be a few intense storms in here that may not be as long tracked. Eastern Iowa, southwestern Wisconsin, northern and central Illinois, northeastern Missouri. And the reason these aren't filled in right now is that there's going to be kind of two pieces of energy to track, one that moves out ahead of the next one, which follows it. But doesn't mean you're not under the gun. It just means the greater chance is north of you. And a strong wind threat as well. Widespread wind damage expected here, kind of derecho-like wind damage in eastern Iowa, western Illinois, maybe sneaking up into southwestern Wisconsin and eastern Missouri. Basically the same areas. Day 3, we do have a marginal risk, but nothing yet too organized at this point. We'll keep an eye on it, but less instability It'll be cooler and lower dew points will be here, but there'll be fast winds aloft in the eastern Great Lakes, so eastern Ohio, western and central PA, and New York certainly could see severe weather. I don't think it's going to look exactly like tomorrow, though, but maybe an upgrade coming to this area and maybe a larger area as well farther east. The southeast, I would be a little bit more concerned about for a few tornadoes. Right now, it's not a high chance, but something that we'll have to watch, especially I think in South Carolina and Georgia, and maybe even far northern Florida and southeastern Alabama. Next week, things will get busy again. Right now, Sunday looks to be a little bit quieter. Monday, we could see some severe weather, but the chances grow on Tuesday, another 30% area, almost in the same exact place, a little farther west and south. So 6 days out, Storm Prediction Center is already ready to have at least an enhanced risk, possibly a moderate risk, and maybe even a high risk. And day 7, I think that chance continues farther east, but the models are not in agreement as to where the exact track of that storm goes. But I think Wednesday the 5th, we're likely dealing with significant severe weather. Here's a reason why, and this is pivotalweather.com. You can see our major storm bringing extremely fast winds aloft in with a close low over South Dakota tomorrow in the late afternoon hours, tracking east across Iowa and Wisconsin. This storm system is going to have a lot of dynamic, quick changing weather with it, from severe weather on the warm side to heavy snow on the cold side. And the difference between where those two happen is less than 100 miles. And that is what we see in March here, blizzard conditions near severe weather outbreaks, unfortunately. And we'll see a repeat of that next week. This tracks eastward and weakens some as it gets into more stable air in the east, but the southeast still has fast enough winds aloft for localized severe weather here. Colder air follows it. Here comes the next one already moving into the west here Sunday night into Monday. And you'll see this is the GFS, another massive trough moving through the Dakotas and moving northeastward into Canada. The Europeans actually a little farther south. I'll show you that, but strong winds everywhere here. We're likely going to see more severe weather, damaging tornadoes, and another winter storm over Montana, Wyoming, and into the Dakotas here. And behind it, the weather pattern is still going to be active. We have uncertainties, of course, but we see an extremely ample upper level pattern, meaning huge dips and huge ridges, meaning more very quickly changing weather. So I'm not going to be able to look too closely at that yet, but something we'll be monitoring. The European, pretty much in line with the GFS here in the shorter term. The next storm system is actually looking a little scarier on the European based on the fact that that track is a little farther south and east, and winds aloft are even faster. If this European model run is correct, and we have 165 mile per hour winds at 500 millibars, then we're going to have major tornadoes in the Great Lakes and parts of the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys. But it's still 6 days away and things will change here. So a little bit too soon to make that call. Could it be worse? Absolutely. Could it be a bit of a dud? That could certainly happen as well. So definitely not done with severe weather. Definitely not off the hook yet at this point. All right, so I'm going to show you the GFS surface chart here. You can see our storm moves out of the plains here tonight. This is around daybreak tomorrow morning. We'll have rain and thunderstorms in the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. Maybe a little bit of severe weather in the morning, but our better chances of coming later in the day as we get more heating in this region. We'll also have a massive snowstorm in the Dakotas here for several hours tomorrow. Just quite a dynamic storm system. You can see our storm areas are blowing up here in the afternoon and continuing into the evening across the Mississippi River Valley from Wisconsin down into Mississippi and Arkansas, maybe northern Louisiana. Everything spreads east and things start to fade a little bit in the morning here, but another push comes through the Great Lakes and into the Hudson Valley and central PA. We'll have to watch in the afternoon for possible severe weather as the warm sector goes all the way up into Maine at this point. In the southeast, it'll be warmer and more humid. There'll be lighter wind aloft than farther north, but there may be enough instability for isolated supercell storms. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Cools off on Sunday, clears out a little bit. We'll have storms down south over the weekend, maybe a few severe storms in Texas, the Arklatex spreading into Mississippi. Not what you want to hear, of course, in this area. Next big storm moves into California here on Sunday, and it's going to drop into the Rockies and Northern Plains, and a lot of cold air waiting for it on Tuesday. So a big snowstorm expected. And here comes our severe weather ramping up Tuesday night in two waves, one across the Mississippi Valley, the other down across Tornado Alley. And then here's Wednesday, and we see quite a bit of severe weather possibly. The GFS is not as impressed farther north, but it has quite a bit down south, once again in Dixie Alley here, Wednesday, even into Thursday. However, the European model is the one that has been a little bit more consistent and the one that is more concerning. And you see, obviously, a big outbreak here tomorrow and possibly even into the eastern US on Saturday. So the European is scarier than the GFS in this case, and it has been over the last several runs. Here is next Tuesday on the European, and as we get into the afternoon and nighttime hours, the low tracks farther south and east. It's more intense. It's deepening into the 970s, sort of a bomb cyclone here. We've got a blizzard from northwest Minnesota into the Dakotas here Tuesday night. And in the warm sector, we have tornadoes in Iowa, southeast Minnesota, Wisconsin, and especially down across the same areas that I think will get hit tomorrow. And that continues into Wednesday across the Tennessee Valley, parts of the Dixie Alley region into the Ohio Valley on Wednesday, and then spreading to the East Coast and weakening some by Thursday. So we'll have to stay tuned on the next outbreak. I'm going to focus the majority of the rest of this video on tomorrow. And that's where I think we've got to be most concerned. Here's the Canadian model, not one I usually use for severe weather. But you can see next week the storm track over the Rockies and then into the northern plains. It's farther south and allows for kind of a bigger warm sector and a bigger area of severe weather here on the 4th and 5th, especially the 5th, and then spreading east and weakening with time. All right, lightning flash density on the European. Here's what tomorrow looks like. Tons of lightning here, starting late tonight down south and in Nebraska. Tomorrow, big time outbreak. We'll have storms from Texas to Minnesota and Michigan. That spreads east and lower some during the day Saturday. We'll still have lightning possible from Florida all the way up into southern New England. That will move off the coast in the evening. We'll have more storms down south late in the weekend into early next week. Here's our next storm on the European, and we can see what will be supercell storms potentially down in here Tuesday evening, as well as a few rotating storms up here. And then Wednesday, another big day of severe weather, especially in the south, but also possibly in the Ohio Valley into the eastern Great Lakes. And it'll stay stormy down south next week. So a lot more severe weather potential here as we get into next week. All right, so now we get closer to the event and our convection allowing models like the NAM and the HRRR get run out beyond 48 hours. And we have a feel for where maybe the ingredients start coming into play for severe weather. This is tonight. We'll just see some scattered showers and storms over Oklahoma. Some could be severe. This is now late tonight. We see stuff going in central Nebraska, moving northeast where there could be hail and strong winds. And then the front moves through there. But tomorrow, here's our storms erupting very quickly in the afternoon, probably around 1 or 2 o'clock Central Time around Kansas City up to Des Moines. And this area continues to grow. And we have multiple supercells within this line of storms. So likely multiple tornado warnings. Some of them could be tornado emergencies by late in the afternoon. That continues into Illinois, southeastern parts of Missouri, and especially Arkansas into Tennessee. And I'm going to zoom in more to show you that. Now, the HRRR model, the HRRR, which is the one I believe is probably going to end up doing a better job than the NAM, has a more intense looking setup here tomorrow. And this is the one that is kind of more towards the ceiling of what could happen, but it is definitely one of concern. This is already early tomorrow afternoon. And then look at Iowa and Missouri here late tomorrow afternoon, and look at Arkansas for that matter. You have kind of two areas here of supercell storms to the north and supercell storms to the south. And I'm going to zoom in too and show you guys state by state what that looks like. But a more dynamic setup here, more individual kind of discrete supercell storms, the kind that produce the stronger tornadoes because they don't interfere with each other as much as you would see during kind of a linear mode, a line of storms, which those lines of storms definitely pack a power punch with wind, but they don't necessarily have as many supercell tornadoes like the ones last Friday night. Here is a look at the NAM farther east in the Ohio Valley, and we'll see rain and storms overnight and into tomorrow. Nothing severe at this point, could be heavy rain though, and then a bit of a lull. And then here goes our main storm system in the late afternoon hours, moving through Iowa, and then into Illinois and southeast Missouri, and then continuing across Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio. This is going to be around midnight tomorrow night. And then this is the overnight hours. And by then, we're probably looking at more severe thunderstorm warnings and less tornado warnings, except maybe possibly in Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee farther south, where there is going to be more instability. The air is warmer, there's more moisture, and there'll still be enough fast wind aloft for that. And then a weakening trend as we get into early Saturday morning over the Carolinas and northern and central Georgia. But things start picking back up here in western Pennsylvania and western New York around lunchtime on Saturday. Now, the HRRR model is much scarier looking. And that's what I'm going to show you here in the Ohio Valley. And the one that I think is going to do a better job, and I hope it doesn't, but I think it will. And you can see this is midday and then early afternoon. And we see things get going in Arkansas, southern Missouri, and now Iowa. Things blow up around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and multiple supercell storms, just a line of tornadic supercells from northeast Texas right into central and southern Illinois around 5 o'clock, and then also across Iowa and moving into northern Illinois and Wisconsin. I'll zoom in on those states to show you, but you can see the threat continues into the evening, anywhere from northeast Louisiana right up into southern Illinois, southern Indiana, and maybe even northern and eastern parts of Kentucky overnight. Definitely a more dangerous look than what you saw with the H or NAM model here. This is the significant tornado parameter as well with the HRRR, and it's just off the charts over parts of Iowa and especially over Arkansas and into southeastern Missouri, the boot heel. This is the area that could get hit the hardest in here, right on into the evening hours. And that continues to be the case here overnight and then weakening with time, as you could expect. Now let's look farther north at the upper Midwest, and there'll of course be a snowy side of this. I'm just going to show you the thunderstorms at this point. And here we go into Friday afternoon, line of storms going into southeastern Minnesota, and then southwestern and southern Wisconsin, and then all the way over to about Chicago right around dinner time. And it'll weaken when it hits Lake Michigan. It's cooler. There's less instability at that point. And then continuing on into the overnight. This all the way is going to be snow, by the way, here from Iowa up into upper Michigan here late tomorrow night. Very impressive storm system. And then here's the HRRR, the one of greater concern. You see rain and a few thunderstorms popping up here, maybe a little bit of snow in the UP here overnight tonight. And then heavy rain across Michigan early in the day, Ohio as well. Then a break, and then as we get towards nighttime, all kinds of discrete supercells here from Minnesota and Wisconsin straight on down. Multiple storms here that we have to keep an eye on, and maybe even a bit of severe weather all the way into southwest Michigan here late in the night tonight. So be prepared there as well. And finally, the south central U.S., we do have to watch for isolated severe weather overnight tonight, mainly around midnight in Oklahoma. Then there's a break coming, and then tomorrow we'll see storms initiating on the southern end of our front over potentially the Dallas area, but probably south and east of you in Dallas, more towards College Station and Tyler. It looks like they might struggle down here, but as we get into Arkansas, Mississippi, northeast Louisiana, a better chance for some severe weather. All right, so we're going to zoom in here, and I'm going to pull up a couple of atmospheric soundings so we can look at tomorrow afternoon. And as we get to about 1 or 2 in the afternoon local time, that's when we start to see storms growing here. I'll pull up a sounding from near La Crosse, Wisconsin, and there is that tornado threat. We have an extreme amount of wind shear in the lower levels, a southeast wind going quickly over the southwest when you get a few thousand feet up. That will certainly be enough rotation for any storm that forms to quickly turn into a tornado. This is a pretty loaded sounding here. It's not as warm as areas farther to the south, but there could be a few tornadic storms here across parts of Wisconsin and eastern Iowa as well. And as we continue this loop, you can see just the area keeps growing here. It'll hit a point where the front is where anything that forms is more elevated and likely to have hail and less likely to have tornadoes. So I don't think Wausau and Stevens Point and areas northward are going to see the severe weather that places like Madison or Janesville could see here. And I'll pull up the sounding east of Janesville and you guys can see what I'm talking about. Tornado threat for sure as those winds turn very quickly with height here. So that's Wisconsin. That's kind of the northern end of things. Oops. Now let's go down into Illinois, and as we look at Rockford and areas onto the west, we have not only the threat for tornadoes, but with extreme instability here, the threat for particularly dangerous tornadoes. I do believe, looking at this, if this model is right, somebody in northwest or north central Illinois could have an EF4, EF5 tornado tomorrow. I do believe that, and I'm going to go ahead and be bold and say that. Will it be Chicago? I really hope not. I think more likely west of Chicago, but definitely that is there. And around the St. Louis area as well, we could have some stronger tornadoes. Pulling up the sounding here from northeast of St. Louis, and certainly a tornado possibility is there as well. It's not quite as unstable, but it is loaded up with moisture, and there's definitely a wind shear here. This is a southerly wind at the surface going quickly to southwesterly aloft. So you've got that rotation in the lower levels of the atmosphere. We call it helicity, and we definitely have that potential for tornadic storms, and they continue into the nighttime, even in parts of southern Indiana, especially around Evansville. Pull up this tornado, and this shows marginal severe, but if you go back an hour, definitely that threat is going to be there. Here we go. Yeah, for some reason, it's got competing moisture sources here, which can certainly cut back that tornado chance. Here's Missouri tomorrow, and obviously a lot of storms expected in Missouri. You can see this one right here south of St. Louis. Looks like it's got tornado possibilities with it. Again, this is just one model. I think it'll change with time, but the whole area of southern Missouri and far downstate Illinois and western Kentucky, this area I think is prime for locally intense tornadoes here tomorrow evening. You can see that certainly with what's on the table here, with a quick increase in winds aloft and a pretty moist sounding as well. Arkansas is certainly going to have tornadoes. Take a look here at tomorrow afternoon. We see things going north and west of Little Rock, then northern Arkansas, and even the Little Rock area under the gun for tornadoes, and potentially a particularly dangerous tornado. This is the Little Rock sounding here right at 21Z, which is 3 o'clock Central Time. So mid-afternoon in Little Rock, possible tornado emergencies, more storms to your south and east, Pine Bluff, Memphis, and areas just west. We're looking at the potential for tornadoes, so multiple tornado warnings likely in here, and that continues at night. This is the boot heel of Missouri. You guys can see tornado threat certainly there, and then things continue on. This is, again, just one model. It could change, but there is support for what could happen here based on what I'm seeing on the models. And then here is Alabama and Mississippi. Your threat's going to come later in the evening and overnight. Of course, when you don't want to see it, but this is the area that got hit really hard here last week. It looks like it'll be just north of that area, but tornado threats around Greenville, tornado threats farther north into northern Mississippi, and this is going to be 10 at night, so it's going to be later in the evening. This is 11 at night, midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and certainly still a chance for tornadoes in the Rolling Fork area, as well as especially northeastern Mississippi. And my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody in this area. You're still licking your wounds from last week's storms, and we're likely going to get hit once again here. Kentucky and Tennessee are definitely in a spot that we have to be vigilant for tornadoes. You can see Kentucky here, especially western Kentucky, northwest Tennessee, very much loaded up for potential major tornadoes in the early evening, and even severe wind continuing overnight. At this point, fewer tornado warnings, but Louisville, we definitely have to be on our toes for that potential for a tornado. Right now, the models aren't showing it necessarily holding together as tornadoes, but it will definitely have strong wind with it. But south of that area, Bowling Green is the area I'm really concerned about for potential tornadoes. Again, the soundings are going to differ here. Finally, let's look east and take a look at what's coming in Friday night, and then this is Saturday morning. Storm line falls apart when it hits the Carolinas. The next line behind it is actually the one to watch here from western New York into West Virginia. And the NAM does not go out past 2 o'clock, but there could be some severe weather again in the southeast here. Probably less of a tornado threat at this point. Here's a significant tornado parameter, and watch how quickly it grows on the NAM tomorrow, especially in western Illinois, southeastern Iowa, and also down across northeastern Arkansas. And then things are mainly limited to the deep south here later tomorrow night. The HRRR model is certainly more robust. I showed you guys that, and we see just incredible numbers on that over eastern Iowa, western Illinois, southwest Wisconsin, numbers above the 10 mark, which is just off the charts. This factors in wind shear, and we see numbers of 18 and 19. While they could be overdone, this is 22, 23. This certainly has the mark of what's going to be just an incredible assault of tornadoes if this is right. And it continues into Mississippi. It continues into Tennessee here in the evening, even into central parts of Indiana. I think at this point we're starting to lose our punch farther north, but farther south, we still have that potential for a significant tornado or two. I don't think we see 10 significant tornadoes here at 10 o'clock at night, but 1 or 2 long track tornadoes I think is going to be most likely. Let's look at snow real quick. I won't spend a lot of time on it. You'll see the leading edge will bring us a few inches overnight into tomorrow in the upper Great Lakes, and then our bigger storm moves in here to the Dakotas and northern Minnesota. Yep, some of these areas that are potentially going to see tornadoes will see snow behind them just 6 hours later here, later tomorrow night. And then the next storm is going to be a much bigger one if the GFS is right, with potentially 10 to 20 inches of snow. And even down to near Denver, we could see a few inches, but the mountains west and north of you obviously have a better chance for that. The national blend of models shows a little bit of snow here in Maine and New Brunswick and southeastern Quebec today. Here comes our Great Lakes storm, and then things ramping up over a foot possible in here tomorrow night into Sunday morning, or into Saturday, I should say. And then the next one's going to kind of double those numbers as we get into the middle of next week. Here's a look at Canada. You can see lighter amounts here with this first leading edge storm, bigger amounts here towards the weekend, kind of following a stripe from Lake Superior on up into eastern Quebec and northern New Brunswick. And then the one after it's going to bring numbers way up here across Ontario and into northern parts of Quebec. And I'll show you farther east as well so that we can see what's coming this weekend. Quite a bit of snow, 20 to 30 centimeters. And then those numbers are going to climb pretty quickly as we head into next week as well. All right, folks, big time storms coming. Big video again for tomorrow as we look to see if the NAM and the HRRR do agree or if they continue to diverge. I believe this will end up being a high risk for some folks. Even a moderate risk should not be taken lightly. Numbers are very impressive for a big outbreak of tornadoes. How many and where, still a bit uncertain. The chance for you to get hit by a strong tornado is very low, but it will happen for somebody, and I want you to be prepared for that. If you could subscribe to my YouTube channel, I'll give you the videos and the updates as soon as I can, and I appreciate your time today. Hope you all have a blessed day. God bless you, and I want to thank you for your support and for stopping by. Feel free to list any concerns or questions you may have. And I want to give all the glory to God, Yahweh, who allows me to do this every day. John 14, don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and also trust in me, Jesus. There is more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you what I'm going to prepare a place for you? When everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am, and you know the way to where I am going. No, we don't know, Lord, said doubting Thomas. We have no idea where you're going, so how can we know the way? And Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. If you had really known me, you would know who my Father is. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. And I just thank God for allowing me to know him, and I pray that you know him as well. With all of the stuff going on in the news, the shootings, the political divide, inflation, strong tornadoes, there's a lot for us to worry about. But the Lord, Jesus says, do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not trouble yourselves with this. Put your faith in God. Put your faith in Jesus Christ. And that's what I've chosen to do. And I pray you do as well. Thank you so much for your time today. Look forward to talking with you again in the morning. God bless you.